The theme of this plenary is Nature para Todos, and what I wanted to do, and I hope have accomplished, is to bring you two speakers who are thinking about this issue in two different ways. José González is an environmental educator, a teacher, and the founder of Latino Outdoors. And Latino Outdoors is an organization that seeks to network Latino professionals together and support outdoor leadership and capacity building opportunities for youth. And it also serves as a storytelling platform for defining the ambicultural identity of Latino communities in the outdoors. So he's really seeking to, or Latino Outdoors is really seeking to make sure that everyone has access to sort of the big wild areas in our national parks, national forests, those kinds of areas. Alina Bhakti is the executive director of the LA Neighborhood Land Trust. And their work is looking at achieving the same mission, but by creating natural spaces in the urban framework where community members can go, you know, not on the big camping trip, but more on the couple hours after school. So these two approaches are sort of working hand in hand to really achieve having the experience of nature reflect the diversity of California. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it off. Oh, you've got your own, right.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to come and speak today. Is it? No, well, I'm just starting first, but I'm actually not speaking first. So Jose and I just wanted to start off before we jump into our presentations to just get you thinking a little bit about some of the themes that we're going to be highlighting in our presentation. And so for me, I'm just going to take 1 minute for you to turn to a person who is sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you, whatever is easiest, to talk about a coalition that you may be in with other organizations, or a key partnership that you currently have with a public agency, with a nonprofit organization, a service provider, whatever kind of academic, and share that. Pick one and share that with your partner that you're going to be talking. So you just get 1 minute to kind of just share. And what is it, the other thing is, what is it about that partnership that is really important? Go ahead.
Or education or outdoor ed in some way, and then that grabs other people's attention. So thank you for that. I'm gonna throw two more questions out at you to continue the conversation. You can talk to the same person or someone new. This idea of nature para todos, we'll get a little deeper into where that comes from. Add to your conversation on partnership how you describe which is what you know, don't know, how you compare, contrast, however you want to frame it, equality and equity. Are they the same, different? What do they look like? Even examples maybe in the partnership that you're talking about. And it's okay if you say, I don't know. That's fine. And then the second piece to that will be pick a favorite flora or fauna. Favorite plant, favorite animal, you know. I'm asking you to pick one, not a whole ecosystem. I know some of you, you're like, but I like all of these. Let's go riparian. No, just one, you know. And the prompt is just tell. I'm being very specific with that word. Tell the other person about it. That's it, okay? So we'll do another minute or two. Make sure you hit on those two pieces. Go for it. Awesome. Thank you so much. Another thing from some of you in outdoor ed, I think there's like 5 different names for this. Quiet coyote, right? Yeah. Thank you for that. So I want to jump right into presenting a few pieces of the slides, and then we can go back into the conversation, especially if you had a rich one or a challenging one, or then hopefully those will come up in the questions. So this idea of nature para todos. Full disclosure, before we knew that the ICUN, I think, hashtag nature for all as well, we had this idea similarly, but the idea is the same. How do we make nature, not, it's the whole question around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and really about trying to make it as multifaceted as possible, which many of you do, many of you understand and get it. But one of the pieces we really want to touch on today is some of the ways in which culture can weave through that. And culture at large, but also specifically ethnic culture. And from my specific example, I do talk about Latinos as an example, but that's an example. We look at how that looks like for different communities. I use this example even now it's a bit dated, but to try to stress how the community, the norms and habits, right, the culture of a community, and in our case can be outdoor enthusiasts, the conservation community, naturalists, those of us that have some passion for the natural world. And how does that compare to, quote unquote, the norms and behaviors or the culture of a specific community, which you might think issues don't cross over or relate at all, but it is noticed, and those are opportunities of connection. And that bridge building is really, when we talk about how to make nature more inclusive, it's about you thinking, this is where my viewpoint is, how do I expand that? It isn't just how do I change it, it isn't how do I swap it, it is how do I add to that? So those of you who remember who this is? Cecil, right? I know. And some of you raise your hands, and I may not be able to call you, but you can just shout it out. So Cecil the lion. So this idea of story is powerful because if I ask you to really think about it, there is a story of outrage, of concern, of urgency, of something needs to be done. This is not right. Right? And so in the conservation community is the sense of how could this happen? Right? As a community, we should be doing something. There should be some accountability. And you see this type of story, whether it's pollinators that are in danger, whenever we have an ecosystem threatened, that sense of urgency and importance is there. So what does that have to do with something like Black Lives Matter, for example, as a social issue? And that's important because if we feel our issue doesn't connect to a social justice issue, because, well, what does that have to do with it? We might be missing something, because it is noticed in communities that say, wait a minute, it's interesting how this is really important for you, but maybe you don't see the comparison to how it's important for us. And it's okay to laugh. I mean, this was done intentionally on Black Twitter to stress that point. Right? I'm going to start dressing like a lion. That way cops know that if they kill me, white people will avenge me. Right? And that was the point that we're making around Black Lives Matter. Right? Had any of you, by show of hands, seen this before or were aware that that was kind of a thing? Right? Some of you. And this came from that community, specifically the Black Twitter community, to stress that point, to say, it's noticeable when this seems to be important, but on our side, it's not. What's up with that? If it helps picture us as adorable safari animals, whatever you need to do to get to the place where murder of a person fills you with all of the feelings of empathy you feel for Cecil, get there. So that same passion and excitement we have for something in the natural environment, how does that transfer to that same level of humanity and empathy for an issue that's important in a community? And similarly is, what is the relationship that we have with that natural landscape? So when I ask you to pick a favorite flora or fauna, you're like, oh, I really love the California newt, right? Or I really love the redwood. And when I asked you to say, tell someone about it, you may not be aware, or you might be, the way in which you describe it or you share that information. And that's important because I'm asking you to think about how you add to the frame of talking about something. And this is important because something as simple as Actually, does anyone recognize this? Good guess? And you might say, well, it's chicalote, and you're like, well, I don't know what that is, right? And this is just an example. It's not meant to be a quiz. So it's a type of poppy, right? Prickly poppy. And so the frame that I'm trying to share is how we will have us, and this is important. I'm not saying that to dismiss it. We will have a certain frame of how we will describe a natural object as this human-object relationship. And that means that we will come across it from this very cognitive relationship of this is how we identify and classify it, and we will describe it as such. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually really valuable and important, and it provides a lot of data. But that doesn't mean that all communities will approach it in that way. You can't be dismissive of the ways in which a community will also use a slightly different frame of thinking about it. So rather than this is what this is, and this is how you identify it or classify it, it will be this is what we call it, and this is what it's used for. Okay? And so I use this example a lot when I was hiking with my uncle down in Nayarit, my home state, where I'll hear this kind of frame. Right? And it doesn't matter if all the information is accurate. That's not the point. So here it's saying this, we can use this as a tranquilizer, an aesthetic against the common cold, maybe even against, it's a cure for cancer. And it's good for warts. And my uncle would always say, that's good for the kidneys, and that's good for the kidneys, and that's good for the kidneys. Right? The point wasn't for me to tell him, that's ridiculous, uncle. Like, how could all of this be good for the kidneys? But to try to understand that relationship of not just utility, but community value. It's a different frame than if I told them, you're wrong. This is what it is, and this is how you identify it. Versus this is what the community has identified it and the value that it has. And for me, the idea is, as I told you, it isn't to say one is better than the other or to challenge or try to correct people, but acknowledge that it's there, and then you can work on actually addressing any incorrect information, which is different than telling someone they're wrong. Okay? And that matters because once you open up to that, you'll be able to notice the way in which a lot of how we think about and address and our love and passion for the natural world intersects with what's important and valuable for communities as other issues, like immigration, and how the migration of monarch butterflies has a direct relationship to the migration of people. Right? And that's an entry point for all of us. And the way in which we then present and describe the information can be more rich, as some of you have been doing in different workshops, talking how art can do that, the arts, the humanities, but thinking about the way in which there's a cultural hook to it. So I can show this, and this is my artwork, by the way, and before I even say, let's talk about our natural process, someone might say, oh, I recognize that, or that looks familiar, or that looks interesting. This isn't a descriptive poster in the same way that if I had something about the hydrological cycle. But once you look at it, or we ask people, what do you see, then we can begin that conversation, and it's different. Right? And hopefully there you can see the water cycle. But we don't have a lot of time. We're covering something that usually we spend all day, so we'll want to just present the issue so we can jump into conversation. And we can talk about the water cycle, human resource relationships, endemic species, with the little, I'm blanking out on the name. Axolotl, thank you. Axolotl. In the same way in which we use cultural frames to enter into a descriptor of a natural process, right? So, si se puede is a cultural frame, right? You say that and it will click something in the minds of an individual community. Okay? And then we've used it as an entry point, talking about from little C to great sequoia, yes we can, si se puede, to talk about carbon sequestration, for example, or where does the simple scientific concept of where does the matter, where does the stuff for a tree come from? That can be a really hard question for a lot of people, right? How does it go from that little seed to this big tree? And so in closing, why this matters is because We often say we really to try to simplify things as if we want to see it through the eyes of a child or engage in that way. But I've often said, I challenge you to think about how you amplify something also through the cultural lens of a community. And think about what is the value that a community is bringing into this space by asking questions and seeing what you are also getting, how you are also getting information about how a community sees a specific landscape. And that's really important. And I'll close by giving credit to my beautiful partner here, Alicia, who's been doing this work in the Bay Area, taking intergenerational families through that same approach. Before we get to let's educate people about a natural landscape is how does a community feel welcome in the natural landscape or in that space? From little daughters to the grandma. And once that happens, you will be amazed at what they will both share that's related and different, not just about what they learned about a redwood or what they learned about the ecology or the watershed management of a place, but how they felt. Right? And to hear a little daughter say, like, this is what feels like home to me. Like, that's the golden nugget you all wish that, right, that kids and individuals that go out there, like, this is so important to me. I feel so welcome here that I care about it and I want to learn more. Versus, yeah, I was interested, or I got really tired, or like I didn't really understand, or I didn't really feel that it was useful to me. Okay? So I'll close there because then I will jump back into more questions and examples. That's it.